Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. As always, I'm Troy, and if there's discouragement in my voice, it's because I am recording this intro twice now. Technology's great until it's not. So, yeah, I'll try this again. You haven't been able to hear. The first one was really the best. It was the best intro I've ever done, and I'm not able to keep it. So we'll see if I can try to duplicate it. Got a great interview coming up, but before I do, just wanted to get into some updates. If you guys have watched the channel, you'll know that here recently was in Arizona. It was the first time I'd ever been to the Southwest, and I'm just blown away by, man, you talk about otherworldly. I know, being a West Virginia boy, I have preconceived notions about a lot of things. When I think of deserts, I think of Roadrunner and Coyote. And down around Phoenix, that's kind of what I saw. But as I got up into the high desert, 7,000 feet and higher, just really amazed at the ecosystem, what's up there and what grows. And I was actually at a homestead checking it out, and just how much food in abundance can be grown in high desert. With just some basic permaculture practices. So it was a really neat place to check out. So he actually had, at one time he had pigs. He didn't have pigs on the property at this time because he's in the process of selling the place. But had pigs there, and we talked a bit how the pigs worked out, even in the high desert and situations. So it was pretty neat. So coming back from that, a little lagged, of course, a lot of travel time in 4 days. There's no direct flight anywhere out of Charleston, so we have to bounce all over the country. But it was a neat experience. So I got to tell you this story real quick before we get into any more details, because it pertains to me being gone. And it's the old adage of, while you're gone, it's basically when things break or cut loose or whatever. So real quick backstory, about 5-6 years ago, built this 15 by 18, I call it a greenhouse, but it's kind of like a hoop house, crackhead, high tunnel. I don't know. I tried to build the cheapest possible high tunnel. It was an experiment to see how cheaply can I build 15 by 18 structure that fits perfectly between the road going up to my workshop and the little stream that comes through our valley. So that's why the dimensions that's why it was 15 wide and 18 long, just for some reason made sense. But the challenge was, could I build it out of 1/2-inch conduit and greenhouse plastic and then sawmill wood? And if you've watched the channel, you've seen it. It's still been standing. It's had some issues, but it's been fine and it's kind of done its trick, done what it's supposed to. I've used it more for chicken brooding and kind of intermediate housing at times for animals. We had our piglets that we bought last year in it for a bit. It was a quarantine area. That's where we did castration. So it's been very multifunctional for us. Well, here recently, in trying to be benevolent, I thought, I'm going to let the boars come in and hang out. We were having these cold snaps coming up. Winter was upon us. This was probably pre-Christmas. Winter was upon us. We knew there were some cold snaps coming. I'm like, let's get the guys out of the back of the valley. The back of the valley is even colder. Let's let them come up here, hang out a little bit. If I need to have a mingle with the ladies again, then it's much easier to transition them over. And, of course, no good deed goes unpunished. Even though I've had pigs in there before, they have never were as destructive as the boars were. They tore it up. They tore up tore the nesting boxes off the walls. They tore a small roost that I had up. They even tore some of the chicken wire that was around the exterior of the roll-up plastic, just things that the other pigs hadn't messed with at all. They decided to just go gung-ho into it. And at one point, one of them even did a Kool-Aid man right through the wall. So I had to reinforce that and repair that. So instead of doing what I should have done, which is just run them back up to their paddock that was made for them, I was like, well, I'll just put we'll put a Band-Aid on this real quick and I'll deal with it later. So wouldn't you know, when I'm away in Arizona, they take out the two center beams. That was something I had to, or center posts. I had to put a ridge beam in the middle of it a couple years ago because a snow load boat at the half-inch conduit was just not strong enough for that type of span. So 2 years ago, I'd put a ridge beam across the 18-foot mark. Had two center posts to support that. And that had been fine for a couple years, but again, with Dr. Destructo's coming in there and tearing things up, they took out those posts just before we had two snow events while I was gone. And of course, it collapsed. So everything is on the ground right now. Actually, not completely on the ground. The plastic is bowl-shaped now, so as the snow is melting, it's full of water, so I can hear it pop and crack throughout the day. So hopefully in the next day or two, the snow will be completely melted. I'll be able to get in there and assess the damage and see what I can do to put the ridge beam back up and put my posts in and repair any busted out stuff. And of course, get those losers out of there and get them back where they belong. But that's what I'm chasing right now. So real quick, some housekeeping stuff. I'm trying to, in 2024, have a renewed effort to get back on the Pastured Pig website. It's kind of gotten stale. And so we're trying to look at that. Honestly, I'm going to be very transparent. Would love to have some help on that. If any of you all would like to help me on that, I can't promise anything. In fact, there's nothing to give because there's nothing there. But would love to have some help, whether it's just content or ideas, just suggestions, anything like that. So throw me a line, troy@redtoolhouse.com. If you want to help with that. I still think that that's an asset that could be beneficial for us if we just figure out a way to use it best. I'm like a squirrel sometimes, or a dog chasing a squirrel sometimes. I've just all these different ideas and go in different directions. But trying to get a renewed effort on that. And also, I want to come back. So we've had our in-home delivery service in existence now for, 4 months. And we came through the holiday season and got some really interesting data from that. So I want to share that, and I'll probably share that on the Patreon side. But then also, as I speak today, recording this intro, the end of this week, I'll be picking up my last hogs from processing. I took them in December the 7th, and the Friday that I'll pick them up will be January. Now the end of January. So I have no idea what it is. What is today? The 23rd. So 4th, 5th, 6th, 26th of January. So that is crazy that it's taken that long to be processed. So I'm going to go there, pick it up, see what's screwed up, if anything's screwed up. Hopefully it's not, but we'll do an episode about that. In fact, I think I've got I'm going to have some help on that episode, because we're going to talk about the processing woes when it comes to quite a few things. And so we're going to have a guest on and talk about those things specifically. You guys have heard Rob before, but we'll get Rob back on here, and he's going to help me out. But we'll talk about that. Hopefully I don't have these horror stories to tell. Hopefully it's all past and not recent experiences. So, but look for that. That'll be coming up, and that'll just be here on the regular podcast flow. I mentioned Patreon. Would love to continue to have support on Patreon there. I thank you so much for those of y'all that have stuck it out. I know some have bailed out a little bit, and I fully understand that if you it's not that you have to support the podcast forever. So we appreciate those that have and those that are sticking with us. But if you'd like us to keep going and help us grow and do what we can do, hopefully get more episodes out in 2024, then please consider supporting the podcast through Patreon. Just $5 a month can get you in there on the base level. Okay, so who are we talking to today? Well, let me click over to my notes because I forgot to have them ready for me. Today, we are talking with Joe Blakeslee, and he has Blakeslee Acres. And it's interesting. So Joe's got a unique story, but it's not as unique as what we're finding. We're finding more and more small farms are putting on-farm processing. They're making that part of their business model. And I think, maybe it's related to what I'm dealing with, maybe not, but just having that control of your farm, so you truly are a cradle-to-grave process. So the farrowing to table, I love the control of that, because that right now is the thing that frustrates me the most. All the time I put into raising hogs, the care that I give them, and then I transport them on their last day to somebody, and they don't they don't have the same dedication to care and maintenance and management that I seem to. So that's what just aggravates me to no end. But yeah, you got to play the USDA game to do those type of things. So whole nother story. We'll get into it with processing. But this is what Joe's got going on, bringing that on farm to help him with his business model. So instead of me saying any more about it, obviously we're going to let Joe tell you guys his story, and I'll catch you all on the tail end. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, Troy.
I assume you are in upstate New York. You're not. Is everything outside of Manhattan or New York City considered upstate New York?
Most people consider upstate New York. I'm actually in Western New York, closer to the PA border and south of Buffalo and Rochester.
Okay. Yeah. I've been through that neck of the woods. There's some beautiful land over in that area.
Yes. Yep. It's mostly farmland, actually.
Yeah.
Everybody that I've met from out of state, they're like, "Oh, you're from New York City?" I'm like, "No, nope, never been there."
Right. For sure. Yeah. Well, good. So, well, let's talk a little bit about Blakeslee Acres. First of all, give me that 40,000 foot elevation kind of description of what you've got going on there. I know you're polyculture, so you got a lot of different things going on with livestock and stuff, but give us that summary if you could.
Yeah. So, my wife and we started homesteading back in 2015. I've always followed on YouTube, I mean, your channel and a whole bunch of other channels, and it was always something I wanted to do. So back in 2020, we bought our new house and property, which consists of 17 acres. And starting in 2022, we started back into livestock again after taking a year or so break to move in and get situated on a new property. And we do pastured pork, of course. We do pastured chicken, meat, and eggs. We do a little bit of grass-fed beef. We have some dairy cows, dairy goats, and meat goat crosses. And we usually raise a few lambs for meat also. And we also do some rabbits.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, you've got a lot going on then.
Yeah.
So you said in 2020 you got started. What were you doing prior to that, Joe? What was that decision to either move? It sounds like you had to move from a previous location. What was your motivation to do this and take on this homesteading lifestyle?
So the first property we bought together was we had a single wide trailer on 4 acres, had a nice little pond on it. And as soon as we signed the paperwork, we were living in an apartment, and I actually started doing layer hens and stuff. I've always been into livestock and poultry and stuff my whole entire life. Starting at, I don't know, probably 12 or 13 years old. I got into working on dairy farms, local dairy farms and stuff throughout high school, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. So when we moved to our own property, we started homesteading there. We raised pastured pigs, dairy goats. We did cows on and off. I did some bees for a while, meat chickens. When we purchased our new property, I decided to sell most of the animals, or I took them to friends' farms. So it gave me time because our property that we bought was completely overgrown, no fence, no barn. So I wanted to make sure that we were kind of getting not jumping right into it.
Yeah, for sure. So is this a full-time gig for you, or do you have all farm jobs? How does that work out?
I just started in November full-time at my custom exempt butcher shop. Yeah. Before that, I was working between 40 and 60 hours off the farm.
Okay. So custom exempt butcher shop. So that's something that you have there on farm. You guys put that together as part of your setup.
Yep. We just built it this past year. We broke ground in May, and we were processing deer by November.
Oh, okay. Wow. So do you have experience in processing? Is that what you did primarily?
Yes. So I worked at a USDA facility for 3.5 years, I want to say. It was something, I have multiple other jobs that I've done, but being a farmer and being in the homesteading, it was always a a goal of mine to learn how to process, and I stumbled upon a job at a semi-local processor, and I uh, got interviewed. It took them a year to hire me because they thought I was overqualified, and I once I got in there, I soaked it all in. I loved it. I was learning every aspect. We did kill all the way through. They had their own storefront, and yeah, so that's where I learned. I learned under USDA regulations for retail cuts straight through their storefront, and it's just a passion of mine on top of the farming. So it just makes sense that you know um, we ended up coming this route.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's stay there if we could, because normally I would maybe move this to the back of the interview or later in the interview once we learn more about your setup. But since we're here, let's go ahead and get into that. So, having that experience, obviously working at a USDA facility that's kill to retail, really great experience, I'm sure there. So, what in your mind was it like? Okay, I'm here to do this, to learn this because I know I want to do this on my own. I know I want to have my own shop at some point, or while you're soaking in it day to day, you're kind of getting the feeling, hey, I could probably do that. Yeah, what was your motivation there, or how did that manifest itself?
So yeah, when I was there, I mean, uh, the owners were very good people. I really enjoyed it, and I didn't have a desire to leave. Uh, I ended up taking a job offer at a day shop, and that didn't pan out. Um, so I ended up taking almost 2 years off from processing, actually, and I went into HVAC. We did some excavating work, plumbing. I'm the type of guy that's open to learn everything. I'm always learning. I'm always trying to learn new things. I got a job offer when he's actually a neighbor of mine. When he found out that I didn't have work right at the moment, and so I did that for a couple of years. And then my now business partner approached me and said, "Hey, are you interested in um, building a butcher shop and doing that full time?" So my wife and I decided to sit down. We ran numbers, figured everything out, and we decided to go for it.
Wow, very good. Is that? I mean, I assume it can be whatever you want it to be as far as expense goes, but that's a pretty big nut to crack starting out because even if you have the structure already on property, you've got to have some serious equipment there, right? I assume.
Yes, the initial investment, we've got a pretty good investment into it, but we have the right business partner to make me feel comfortable with what we're doing. We've actually, it was just a piece of our property that we hadn't touched yet. It was all overgrown and red brush. So we started from scratch, and we built the whole building. It's a small building right now, but we have plenty of future plans on expanding on it already. So,
oh, that's great. Being able to start with a blank slate, you can, like you said, just build it in with expansion in mind, and not have to work around some structure that doesn't quite fit your model.
Yes.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So, so you said you got started, or you got it put together, and then just within months you're doing deer during the hunting season. That was this year, or that was last year?
Yes, this was this past the 2023 rifle season. We actually got power to the building 2 days before rifle opener, and we opened up that was on a Thursday, and we opened up that Saturday to start processing deer.
Is rifle in New York, is that around Thanksgiving week like it is here?
Yes, the was November 18th is when we open.
Yeah. Okay. Well, excellent. So obviously, deer is that like the gateway animal for custom processing? I know a lot of guys around here do that, or is it just, hey, it's just what's in season, it's what we started with, and we know we've got a lot of opportunity there?
Yep, that's how we did it. We really pushed because in about 4 weeks, we went from having half a building to a running facility to put deer through. Because, like I said before, I was working between 40 and 60 hours a week on top of the farm, and I was building the butcher shop primarily by myself.
Yeah, wow.
So we had a lot going on, and we decided that I was going to stay at the butcher shop full time to get it finished in time to open up in time for deer processing because we knew it would be a good way to start with having a lot of income coming in all at once, just opening the business. So that was our thoughts on it. We get the deer processing, get our name out there. It's smaller animals to deal with, a little bit less regulations we got to deal with. So that was our thought process: get some money rolling into the business, and then keep on with our build and everything.
Yeah. Okay. So I assume for 2024, then the game plan is to get the word out to local farms that you guys are a full service custom shop, that you'll be able to do beef and hogs. What all are you doing? Are you doing lamb? Are you doing rabbits,
Yep.
chickens, anything like that? Are you?
Yep. So we are offering beef, pork, lamb, goat, limited amount of rabbit. We aren't sure on poultry yet, just because I have to figure out price points, and I'm still in the beginning process of figuring out how long it's taken me because I'm here daily by myself. It's just me here. So I'm in the middle of figuring out routines, figuring out how long it takes me to do a whole pig, a whole beef, kill all the way through. So
Yeah. Yeah. So this is interesting because this is something that, and we've got another episode coming up where we're going to be talking about the woes of processing. But when it comes to processing beef or goat or lamb, anything other than pig, where you don't really have a lot of that post processing, where you're going to cure and smoke, how much does that change the game for a processor, whether it's custom or USDA? When you're into that situation, it's like, okay, pig's going to take this long to cut down to primals, but because of the smoking and curing, it adds a lot more cost or requires a lot more space in the facility, I assume?
yes, so storage space, that's what I'm going through right now. We haven't got our smokehouse yet. It's on order. I have been doing pigs for people. I just started up the last couple weeks doing beef and pork and offering services for lamb and goat and stuff. And that's what I'm trying to figure out right now, because you're holding on to that animal for an extra week or 2 weeks, depending on your curing process for your hams and bacons. So you got to have that extra storage on top of the beef that's coming in every 2 weeks. We dry age for 2 weeks. So yeah, there's a lot of small details that can be overlooked pretty easily. I have overlooked them myself. That's why I know. So the biggest thing is, if you're planning on getting into it, is go as big as you can possibly afford with your cooling and freezing space, would be my biggest thing to point out to people.
Yeah, because you can never have too much freezer or cooler space, I assume.
No, you're always gonna wish that you had more.
Yeah.
It's just like barn space on a farm.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Excellent. All right. So what is? I assume you're in that area that's good farm country. So I figure you probably have a lot of potential customers. What's your game plan as far as getting the word out? And obviously, since it's just you've got a smaller nut to crack. Now, granted, you've got to cover the expenses of all that equipment, but what's your 2024 look like as far as forecasting? I want to have this many animals in here per week, or are you still trying to figure that out?
We're in the figure out stage of that. I just started cutting my first beef this week that I processed 2 weeks ago. And then pigs, I've got a pretty good handle on how long it's going to take me to kill, cut, wrap, and do sausage. My goal that I set for myself when we first started this, I was going to aim for 2 beef and 4 pigs a week. That was completely by myself. Wow. Once I get my routine down, I think it's possible. Right now, I think starting out, my main focus the next couple months is 2 beef and 2 pigs a week, until we get our smokehouse set up, get a good rhythm with that, and get just a good steady rhythm with everything going.
Yeah. Wow, that sounds exhausting.
Yeah. It's been pretty hectic, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Do you have, I don't know what the technical term is, but do you have the overhead trolley system that you can move them around that way, or are you lugging carcasses?
I am lugging carcasses because when we first planned this out, we bought a small butcher shop out of all the equipment, and that came with a small walk-in freezer, small walk-in cooler. We got a saw, grinder, cuber, all the basics. And once we got the cooler tore out, we found out that the panels are pretty rotted. So that changed our process of what we were planning on doing. So right now we are using a reefer trailer for the immediate time being of cooling carcasses. We had a guy weld up a rail system in there, and we're using a skid steer to get carcasses moved around. But here in the near future, in the next couple months, we're actually already planning on putting another addition on the back of our building, probably as big as the building. So we're pretty much doubling in size already.
Wow.
And that's going to house our indoor kill floor and dry age and a pull down cooler.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Well, good. Yeah, sounds like you guys have got a plan together and working in that direction.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll definitely be something we have to maybe come back in a year or so and revisit and see how things are shaking out for you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about your pigs then. And we've kind of gone around, kind of doing this backwards. But tell me about your pig setup and what you're raising there on your 17 acres.
So right now I have dedicated probably 3 acres of just pasture to the pigs. It's mostly pine. It's just an area that I wasn't doing anything else with the beef and the goats and everything else that I have. And like I said before, everything was overgrown. So I really wanted to get into raising pigs. I do it for a lot of family and friends right now. I'm trying to grow that business to expand now, especially now we have the butcher shop. But 2 years ago when I was looking for feeder pigs, I could not find any at all. Like I had one lady, she posted like 40 feeder pigs and they were gone in 15 minutes. Wow. And so I reached out to a lady down in Pittsburgh, PA, and I drove, I can't remember how long it took me to get down there. I drove down there and I bought some Mangalitsa cross pigs from her. And they were a breed that I was always interested in. I didn't do a ton of research on, but in the moment, it was all I could find for a reasonable price. They were probably 4.5 months old already. So I ended up bringing those back, and that's what I started with. And I am slowly transitioning away from the Mangalitsa now that I've got 2 years of raising crosses under my belt.
Yeah.
So I transitioned. I sold the Mangalitsa cross boar, and I bought a Berkshire Duroc boar. He's been pretty good. I've got my first litter and sold that out of one of the Mangalitsa cross sows. The sows, I bought 2 separate sows from a different breeder, and they are Mangalitsa, Berkshire, and Hamp with a little bit of old spot. Super good mothers, but crossed onto a 50% Mangalitsa, I found the growth rate was just taking way too long for what I wanted for the chop size and the amount of fat that I was getting, which I knew they were a lard pig. But at 13 months, 14 months old, when I was processing them, I was getting a super small pork chop. And around me, there's plenty of farms that are raising pork. So, and we're not super close to a major city. I just don't have the market to do the Mangalitsa pork.
Yeah.
Around us, it's more of a commercial hog type setup, and everybody's expecting a larger chop, more bacon, not as much fat. So it's a know your market kind of thing, and go where you're going to be able to make a profit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in that, and recognizing that what the market will bear. And if you're in a major urban center, you may have a little bit more specialty meat opportunity there, but recognizing that and saying, hey, it's time to transition away and get something that's going to produce sales. So yeah, very good.
Yep. So I ended up picking up 2 blue butt. One was a sow, one was a gilt. She did not breed last year. I took a chance, but I got them on a really good deal. And so I was like, if she doesn't breed, I've got the shop here. It's not something that okay, I got to wait 6 months to get a processing date for her. I can put her through pretty much anytime I want.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you've got a lot of advantage there. With the custom shop, and I assume this is the same in New York, but if you would take one of those sows that's not producing, you're still selling her as a whole or half to your customer base, or you're processing her to consume yourself, right? I mean, you cannot do
yeah.
cuts out of that.
No,
Yeah.
nope. You can't do cuts, just like every other state. So that's the downfall, but we do plan on, our end goal with the butcher shop is possibly trying to go USDA.
Does New York have state inspection level or just either customer USDA?
I do believe they still have state inspection level. I haven't looked into it because most shops around here are either USDA or custom exempt.
Gotcha. Okay.
There is a few shops that have the USDA and the state level inspection, so they can buy USDA cuts and sell it in a small storefront.
Mm-hmm.
So there is still a state inspection, which I am also possibly going to look into that level, depending on which route we go with it. Just starting out, we figured we go with custom exempt, get our foot in the door, get a customer base, and then see where we go with that.
Yeah. So I assume that with what you have on farm, so with the with some of the beef that you have now, I know that you said in your pre-screening that some of your beef is dairy, and there may be some more meat breeds. But are you looking at trying to be that start to finish all the way across the board, that I really want to sell my pork and my beef and lamb that's coming off of your farm, and that's going to be primarily what runs through your processing facility at some point? Or are you trying to do a balance there? What do you think?
Yeah, so I would really like to get to the point of being start to finish completely all the way through. But I also realize space-wise that I'm limited on what I can and can't do. So all of my stuff I'll probably do, especially the beef side of it. I do have a small herd of beef cows, but I am revisiting on how I'm dealing with that. I think I'm going to try to downsize on the size of my cows to manage what I have for pasture here. I do have a free lease on my neighbor's property, which I'm super grateful for. That's like another 15 or 16 acres of grazing potential there.
Wow.
And I'm hoping to start slowly growing that with other neighbors around me. But starting out, it's tough with just 3 or 4 cows to make it profitable to go from calf all the way to finish on limited amount of grazing space.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Definitely. So you mentioned that you had 3 acres overgrown, kind of a pine thicket where you put the pigs in. Explain that a little bit more and how that's been working out, and are they handling that ground the way you expected them to?
Oh yeah, they are. They pretty much got it completely cleared out from when it started, and they're doing really good in there. It's not so much of grazing standpoint like your setup is with having the oaks and hickory and the nut trees, which I would love to have. I just don't have that on my property. So my idea was to get them out on pasture, utilize a piece of my property I wasn't utilizing elsewhere, and rotating the pigs through there. There's a couple small fields, I want to say maybe 1/8 of an acre each, that's in there that I used the pigs to turn over this year. I'm going to be replanting specifically for pigs for future. But they're doing an excellent job at taking the undergrowth, I should say, out and turning it back in. Some grass has grown back in there in a couple spots, surprisingly, with having the acidic soil with the all the pine trees that are in there.
Yeah. I was going to ask you what the soil quality's like in there. Are you thinking you're going to take some of the pine down and open up more canopy, or just kind of wait and see?
I was talking to a friend of mine today about that. I'm thinking about taking most of the saw logs off there to dry and saw, because I'm hoping to build some kind of farrowing type barn up there Right now, I have everything in my garage that came with the house, and I would like to have the garage back for garage space eventually.
Right.
So I am considering taking a bunch of the pine trees down and hopefully turning that into more of a pasture and maybe silvopasture. I'd like to um, convert it over to maybe some oaks, some more walnuts, maybe some hickory. There's some hickory on the backside of my neighbor's woods. That is some future plans of mine. Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's so it sounds like infrastructure wise, when you bought the property, you had the house and the garage. Were there any other
Yep.
outbuildings that you're utilizing, or that's why you have such a need for building something right now?
That's all I had here, and there was a guest cabin just above our pond.
Oh, okay.
But structure wise for animals, there was nothing here. So we turned the garage was more of like a pole barn, just an open pole barn they used for storing four wheelers and stuff because this was a camp.
Mhm.
And so I kind of converted that over into usable livestock space.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. So is that is that pine that you have? Is that a white pine?
It's actually most of it is red pine, and then there's some Norway spruce and a couple other varieties of spruce trees.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah,
Yep.
you've got good potential building material there for sure.
Yeah, they're nice straight, really nice straight saw logs. It's actually a planted pine orchard, is what it is.
Ah, okay, yeah, yeah. That explains a lot too. So that's probably why
Yep.
you've got such density as well, because they're maximizing that space and not probably not getting a lot of canopy opened up until you take some of those down.
Yes.
Interesting. Are you so? What are you using for infrastructure for fencing in that situation? You just doing a single strand? Are you doing polywire? You're doing netting?
So for my pigs, I have part of it is three strands of uh, it's 14 gauge electric wire, and then the rest of it's two strand electric wire around the main pastures. And then I started separating the bigger paddocks off with single strand of poly wire. Um, but the pigs like to root up. A lot of our soil is clay. So in the summertime, when it dries out, it gets rock solid and it doesn't ground very well.
Hmm.
Um, so with the poly wire, the pigs would walk right through it. I'm thinking that I'm going to get a different style of poly wire that has more copper conductors in it and test waters with that. And then maybe also run a ground wire system through the whole fence thing, especially for the pigs, um, just to help with that issue. But other than that, they do fairly well on the two strands of solid steel wire.
Yeah, yeah. You keep it hot, they'll stay where they need to be for sure.
Yes.
Well, excellent. So, so you said something about clay there, and obviously, I know what clay's all about. So that was going to lead into my next question. What about water in that 3 acres without any infrastructure? How are you getting water back there? Are you transporting right now, or do you have anything in place?
So what I have is I have a it's a yellow it's actually a gas line, but the water line fittings fit in it, and I run that all the way down my whole property, and I have different junctions off that I use for watering the cows and the pig pastures because I have cattle pasture just on the lower side of that, and I run that off of a garden hose hookup on my guest cabin.
Ah, so it sounds like you've got slope. You're taking advantage of slope there to get some pressure from gravity.
It's actually uphill,
Oh,
and
okay.
everything's pressurized from my houses, which at the bottom of my property. So my goal for this year is I want to set up a little bit better watering system because I have a pond. I also have a spring house, and I just started developing a second spring that's about in the middle of my property. So I'd like to set up some kind of pump system and a holding tank up by the pig pastures so I can utilize gravity for feeding those pastures.
Yeah, yeah. So right now, running off the house water, is that municipal water or is it a well?
No, it's actually spring. It's
Oh,
a
spring.
spring
Yeah,
house.
wonderful.
The only I do run into issues in the summertime is it doesn't produce enough water. It wasn't built for farm use. It was built for a single small, our house is very small. It was used as a cabin. Um, So that's what it was actually designed for. So in the middle of summer, when we start drying out, I do run into the issue if I have to keep an eye on it. And otherwise, I've run it out and I've burnt out a couple pumps doing that,
Yeah.
not paying attention to what I was doing.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. So the next question I have to ask you, especially this time of year, being where you're located, I assume lake effect snow is a real thing in your neck of the woods.
Oh yeah, yep. We're right at the bottom of the snow belt. We don't get hit as bad as say Buffalo or down by Erie, PA, where they get the direct lake effect snow. But we do get the residual from it, and we can have storms where we get dropped, a foot to 4 feet all at once, all in one night. Uh, so it makes it interesting this time of year.
Yeah, yeah. When the electric fence gets buried in snow, and
Yep.
then there's a challenge that comes, of course.
Luckily, I bought a new fence charger last year, and the pigs respect that fence charger so much that I actually had last year and most of this winter so far, I've turned the fencer off completely, and the pigs refuse to leave. I actually had that issue last weekend trying to move my blue butt sows down to the new stalls in the garage. It took me 2 days to coax them out of there. Because they refused to leave. I had the gate wide open, and it's big enough for a tractor to fit through, and they refused to come through, even with feet on the other side.
Yeah.
So I've got pretty lucky with the right fencer and stuff, knock on wood. But I also have a couple solid pens up there built out of cattle panels and hog panels. If they do start wandering, I'll lock them up in there until I can get electricity back to the pastures.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I know you guys are experiencing a little bit warmer winter, I assume, because I think most of New York,
Yes.
most of that is. So do you normally have solid frozen ground now, and is that an issue with your livestock and sacrificial areas with being clay and water? I know what that produces when it doesn't freeze. That becomes an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, up until 2 weeks ago, it was a mess. The pigs have a big enough area; it's not so bad. But with the heavier livestock like the cattle, I try to keep them off my neighbor's pastures, and I have a sacrifice pasture here, and I've been rotating bale grazing around in those pastures. But even then, you only can rotate so many times
Right.
on a smaller piece of property like I have before you start getting a pretty heavy mess with the clay, like you said.
Yeah, yeah, we have the situation here where we have so much slope that my sows like to hang out in the farrowing barn this time of year because it's nice
Yep.
and warm, and but for me to drive up to the farrowing barn with feed, I tear up the road because the road's just a dirt road. Well, it's a mud road right now, so I want them to come down to the ground level to feed, so they have to walk down the trails that they create, and those trails are getting walled out pretty good. So it's I just kind of give it up and say, oh, this is a sacrificial area here on this slope, and I've put some erosion berms down at the bottom to try to mitigate that. But yeah, it's a challenge when things don't freeze anymore. Down here, they just won't freeze. We'll have frozen ground for maybe a week out of the year at most.
Yeah, I can definitely see the challenges from that. Luckily, we've had 2 weeks of frozen ground. Next week's looking really cold. For a couple more weeks, but then we get into February where the winter's just been weird. Maybe the last 8 years steady, where we'll get a couple. We're in the middle of getting some hit with some storms right now, and then all of a sudden it'll thaw back out, and we got mud, and then we go back to snow. We've had snow in the last five years, all the way up till May, and into May. We've actually had snow a few years ago on Memorial Weekend.
Wow. Yep. Yeah, that would be a little disheartening, I would think.
Yeah, it is when you're trying to do a grazing operation and you're hoping to get your cows out on some nice grass that hasn't grown yet.
Exactly. You're looking at that hay inventory getting lower and lower, and recognizing what a bale costs.
Yeah, I just went through that. I bought 50 bales a few months ago, thinking that would get me all the way through till March, and I just ended up starting to buy round bales and square bales again. And they tend to go up in the middle of winter. So
Yeah, for sure. Ouch. Well, at least sounds like being where you are in ag country, you don't have to go too far to find them. That's the situation we run into down here. If you want to get a lot of round, you got to go a pretty good distance.
Yeah, this year's been tough to find rounds just with our weather pattern. Last year we had May was excellent haying season, but most people aren't prepared to do hay around here in May. Usually it's first, second week of June before they can even get on the fields. So May was really good, and then June got super wet, like the whole month of June.
Yeah.
So they couldn't get out on the fields to get the first cutting off if they didn't take advantage of the early weather. So a lot of farms didn't even get first cutting until after the 4th of July.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of made a hay shortage up here. I actually had a hard time finding round bales to buy. I thought I was going to have to start selling some cattle.
Yeah, and you guys probably don't do a third cutting up there. Do you get that?
It just depends on the farm. Some farms, especially the dairy farms around us, try to get at least a third cutting. We've actually got a few farms that are pretty proactive, and they'll get a 4th or 5th cutting on some of their seeded ground.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, Joe, tell me, in the time that we have left, what does the future look like? We've talked a little bit about the processing facility that you're looking to double your square footage here this year and just add on there. But where do you see yourself in 5 years with not only the processing but in the pigs, but the entire farm itself?
Yeah, so what my goal in probably the next 5 years would definitely be to I'm in the middle of revamping my genetics with the pigs. I have some lines of I'm looking to go more of a Berkshire and maybe Hereford kind of genetic line, maybe with a little bit of Duroc in there. I want to get to more of a heritage style hog that grows respectably well on pasture, and you can still make a little bit of a profit off of it. I'd like to grow my pastured pork, especially now with the butcher shop. I can market it a little bit easier and have a little bit more control over my processing dates. And then the beef and stuff, I'm not quite sure where we're going with that. I've got a couple leads that I'm supposed to be talking to a couple people on. I would really like to continue with the beef, but I've also considered transitioning just to do finishers, buy some 400 or 500 pound feeders and then switching over. Right now we're not breeding. We don't have any breeding stock for sheep. What I usually do is buy some bottle lambs and I let my children raise them up. They do all the care and all the work with them, and then when we process them and sell them to individuals.
Okay, you broke up a little bit beyond that. So are they okay when it comes time for processing? If they've been bottle feeding them, how does that transition work for you?
Both of my kids have been raised around it, so they're good. My son's 5 years old. He's been cutting meat with me since he was 2. My daughter's been out in the shop since she was 3 or 4 years old. They're both really, really good about it. They know when they get them, they understand what their purpose is, and they get attached. They do have that day when processing comes, they get sad about it, but they go right into the next whatever we're doing next, and they handle it really good.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yep. Teach them young. Wonderful. So I have to ask you a question, Joe, that I ask everybody, of course, and that comes on the podcast. What do you like the most about raising pigs on pasture?
There's a lot of likes that I like about it. I really enjoy seeing the pigs out in the pasture, raising them in a respectable way, not in confinement. I've done both myself. When I first started, I had confinement pens, and they just seem so much healthier, happier. The meat quality it has so much more flavor to it. But the biggest thing is just seeing the animals a lot more content and a lot happier, it seems. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Good answer. Very good. Well, you actually have you have some online presence as well, don't you? Don't you have a YouTube channel and some other social media?
Yep. So we started the YouTube channel not quite a year ago. It's still pretty small. That is Blakeslee Acres on YouTube, and we also have a Facebook page for the farm. That's Blakeslee Acres. And we also just started a Facebook page for the butcher shop for anybody that might be listening that's local and needs any updates with what we have going on with that is Bare Bones Butchering on Facebook.
All right. With your YouTube channel, are you covering basically just homestead life, focusing on a specific area?
So yeah, it's homestead, small farm life. I'm going to be doing more processing videos. Once I get a rhythm in the shop and figure out, all the ins and outs of the shop, I plan on doing some processing and butchering videos also.
Yeah, very good, very good. I'll have to talk to you off mic about off recording about a good processing knife and sharpening system. What you would recommend as a processor, because I am constantly finding a good knife for chicken processing and finding a way to keep them sharp and all that type of stuff. I feel like I've bought every knife sharpening gimmick out there and still haven't found one I like. All right. Well,
yeah, I could definitely give you some tips on that.
All right. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. For those of you who listen aren't going to know that Joe was very gracious to wait a half hour for me to get my technical difficulties figured out. So he's been more than pleasant to deal with, and even though I've delayed him a half hour, making his night go any longer. Joe, I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
I appreciate you having me.
Well, I appreciate Joe coming on the podcast. Enjoyed his what he's got going on up there in New York. If you would like to be on the podcast, or you know somebody that should be on the podcast, or you know an issue we should talk about on the podcast, or if you think I should just get on here and make funny noises with my armpits, reach out to me and let me know. You can email me at troy@redtoolhouse.com, or if you go to thepasturedpig.com, you can use our pre-screening info, and that just helps me know where you're coming from, what time of day is best to try to schedule a call with you, and just helps me kind of do some of that front leg work. So reach out to me and let me know, and we'd love to get more in the queue. I think I have 2 more interviews that set up that we haven't recorded yet. Actually, as I'm recording this bumper, I totally dropped the ball on Stephanie. So Stephanie, I'm sorry. We said the one Monday, and I thought it was the next Monday. So I've missed that Monday. So I've sent you an email and tried to reschedule with you. So hopefully get you on there. And then the other one I had lined up for tonight, actually, was you guys can relate to this. It was scheduled to have a call, and Josh had water lines in his barn that thawed out and ruptured. So he was ankle deep in water and cold and trying to get water lines repaired. So, of course, podcast interview has to take a back seat. But we'll see if we can try to get an update from him when we get him on here. Maybe he can tell some stories we can all share in his lament of cold and warm and cold and warm. He's in eastern Tennessee, so he gets to deal with that the way we do. It's be 60 degrees here in a couple days, and it was 0 degrees just 2 nights ago. But anyway, we digress. Well, I again appreciate the Patreon support. If you consider supporting the podcast, just go to the Patreon link in our show notes, and we'd love to have your support and appreciate all that you guys do. Well, I pray everyone have a great week. Y'all take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast, or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.